Dubro Suspicion Files.
You know the phrase, don't drink the Kool-Aid. We've all heard it, right? Maybe we've even said it. It's our go-to shorthand for blind faith, for, following the crowd off a cliff. It's just baked into our language now. But what if that whole story, the one that gave us that famous phrase, is just wrong? What if the saying itself is a myth? And what if that myth is covering up something way darker, way more tragic than most of us realize? So that's exactly what we're going to do today. We are setting the record straight. We're going to tear down the myths about the Jonestown tragedy piece by piece, using the actual evidence, historical, forensic, all of it, to figure out what really happened on that day back in 1978.
Okay, so to get how this all ended so horribly, we have to go back to the beginning. And the beginning of the People's Temple, well, it wasn't what you probably think. It wasn't just some cult from day one. For thousands of people, it was this incredible, radical beacon of hope.
I mean, you have to picture this. We're talking about the 1950s, deeply segregated America. And here comes Jim Jones, in Indiana of all places, building a church on absolute racial integration. It was this wild mix of Pentecostal faith healing and what he called apostolic socialism. For people dealing with racism and injustice every single day, this wasn't just nice, it was revolutionary. It felt like, wow, maybe this is the one place in the whole country where you could actually be free.
And that quote right there, from a survivor named Hyacinth Thrash, man, that just says it all, doesn't it? I've found my church. Just imagine seeing a completely integrated choir on TV back then. It was this powerful vision of a better world. And that's what drew people in. Not fanatics, but thousands of idealistic, regular people who just wanted to build something better.
But that dream, that beautiful idea born in the Midwest, it was destined to die a nightmare in the jungles of South America. Because the move to Guyana, that was it. That was the beginning of the end.
So Jones was getting some bad press in California, and he decided to move almost 1,000 of his followers to this remote settlement in Guyana. The promise? It was paradise on earth, a socialist utopia. But the reality? Survivors call it a concentration camp. Total isolation, no way to contact the outside world. I mean, it was the perfect setup for one person to have absolute terrifying control.
And look, this wasn't some sci-fi movie brainwashing. There's a real psychological term for it, coercive control. It's a system. You isolate people, you control every single piece of information they get, you make them totally dependent on you for everything. Jones basically created this bubble, this total environment, where his word wasn't just law, it was the only reality that existed.
And the most terrifying part of this control, these things he called white knights. An alarm would go off in the middle of the night, Jones would get on the loudspeaker, say they were under attack, and order everyone, men, women, children, to line up and drink a liquid he claimed was poison. Can you even imagine? It was a loyalty test, for sure, but it was more than that. It was conditioning. He was desensitizing them to the idea, reframing suicide not as an end, but as this revolutionary act.
So they had practiced their own deaths over and over. And then the catalyst arrived, the thing that would turn the final rehearsal into the real horrifying thing. A U.S. congressman showed up.
And you have to understand how this all went down. The timeline is absolutely critical. A few people decided they wanted out, and they tried to leave with Congressman Leo Ryan. But as they got to the airstrip, Jones's guards ambushed them and opened fire. And get this, at the exact same moment, back in Jonestown, Jones calls the final white knight. The second a U.S. congressman was murdered, that was it. There was no going back. It was the doomsday scenario he had been planning for all along. Which brings us to the single biggest, most important correction we have to make. We've all been told this was a mass suicide. But the evidence, the forensics, it tells a completely different story. It's a story of mass murder.
304. Let that number sink in for a second. That's not just a statistic. That's how many children died in Jonestown. Babies, infants, kids, and they were the first to be killed.
The case for this being a mass murder is, frankly, irrefutable. I mean, it started with the murder of 304 children. Children can't consent to suicide, period. We have eyewitnesses who saw poison being squirted into babies' mouths with syringes. We know armed guards surrounded the whole area with orders to shoot anyone who tried to escape. And we have confirmation that at least 70 adults who refused, they were held down and injected with cyanide against their will. This was not a choice.
And this is where the whole myth starts to unravel, because even the most famous detail, the one that became the saying, is wrong. They didn't drink Kool-Aid. The evidence, the packets found at the scene, it was all Flavor Aid, which was a cheaper brand. Now, that might seem like a tiny detail, right? But think about it. If we got that wrong, what else did we get wrong about the story?
And we actually have a recording of the final moments. It's known as the death tape. It's this chilling 44-minute audio of the whole thing going down. And on it, you can hear Jim Jones just masterfully spinning what's happening. He's not calling it a defeat. Oh, no. He calls it a revolutionary suicide, a final protest against an inhumane world. He's rebranding mass murder as a heroic act.
But here's the thing. That very same tape completely demolishes his own narrative. You can hear a woman, Christine Miller, bravely arguing with him. She's being logical, saying, hey, why don't we just try to go to Russia? And then you can hear the children, crying, screaming in terror as they're being poisoned. That is not the sound of a revolutionary act. That is the sound of murder. So, if the evidence is so clear, why? Why do all these myths and crazy conspiracy theories about Jonestown still hang around? Well, the answer has less to do with the actual facts, and more to do with our own psychology, how our brains try to make sense of something so awful. All right, let's just bust these myths right now. Was it a mass suicide? Nope. False. It was a mass murder-suicide, starting with the children. Was it some secret CIA experiment? Absolutely false. That whole story was literally invented by Jim Jones's own lawyer to deflect blame. Was the body count faked? No. The tragic reason the first count was low is because rescuers didn't realize hundreds of children's bodies were buried underneath the adults.
So here's the psychological reason why. It's something called proportionality bias. Basically, our brains are wired to think that a huge, massive event must have a huge, massive cause. The idea that one paranoid, drug-addicted man could cause the deaths of over 900 people, it just doesn't feel right. It feels disproportionate. A giant CIA conspiracy? Well, that feels like it fits the scale of the tragedy. It's a mental shortcut that makes a grand conspiracy feel more satisfying than the messy, disturbing truth.
And that brings us all the way back to where we started. That phrase, drink the Kool-Aid, it isn't just factually incorrect, it's actually really harmful. Survivors and the families of the victims say it's deeply offensive. Why? Because it puts the blame on the victims. It turns them into a punchline and completely ignores the reality of coercion, terror, and murder.
So now that we know the real story, we have to ask a different question. How should we remember the 918 people who died that day? Maybe the best way to start is by getting rid of the myths and the jokes, and instead remembering them for who they really were, victims. Victims of a terrifyingly charismatic manipulator, and victims of a horrifying demonstration of just how powerful coercive control can be.